And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome to Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou. Our show today comes to you from the traditional and unceded territory of the Tsimshian people. Introduced in 2018, the speculation and vacancy tax was designed to turn empty homes into housing for people in British Columbia. On today's Open Connection, we open our archives as John Crawford reports on the housing crisis in 1991.
For the past couple of years, it's been extremely difficult to find a house or apartment to rent in Terrace. It wasn't always that way, as Alderman Danny Sheridan told us last summer.
I suppose if you look back in Terrace over the last 10 or so years, at one point we did have a surplus when there was a downturn in the economy of rental accommodation. And obviously the surplus has been taken care of, eaten up, or being used, and people are moving in, and I guess employment is the main reason, and consequently now we don't have the portfolio of rental accommodation that a community probably should. When you see vacancy rates of 0.03, which equates out to perhaps 2 apartments vacant in a month, it's a fairly serious problem. I don't know if I'd call it a crisis, but it's certainly a serious problem.
The problem was serious enough that by last spring, when 2 families moved to town, there was suddenly virtually nothing available. At about the same time, Terrace was the site of a regional housing forum. At that forum, several speakers representing provincial government agencies, local bodies, and real estate outfits addressed various housing issues. For Terrace, one positive aspect was the fact that houses were found to be among the most affordable in the province, if you were buying. Though, as Alderman Sheridan pointed out, even there the silver lining had a cloud.
Most of the homes that have been constructed have been custom-built homes, particularly for that individual, and have been in the upper price range category, and there has not been a predominant amount of spec homes put on the market, and the lower priced part of the market, I suppose, is starting to dry up a bit too. So I suppose somewhere in that 70, 80, 90 range, we do have a problem. There's not a lot of available housing there, and eventually I think Council, in conjunction with the Housing Commission, are going to have to discuss that and see. I don't know if the city can do something about it or not, but certainly we'll have to sit down and talk about it.
And certainly the Housing Forum spotlighted the rental crunch, not only for Terrace, but for Smithers and, to a lesser degree, Prince Rupert. The answer?
It's really a difficult scenario trying to provide rental accommodation, because the majority of what's needed in our community, as is in a lot of communities, is a low-income rental units. And because of the cost of construction in today's marketplace and the value of land, even though we are enjoying some of the lowest costs in the province, it's still unaffordable for a developer to provide low-income rental units because the cost of development is too high. So you need to subsidize.
One of the recommendations from the Housing Forum was the creation of a city housing commission for Terrace. To date, that hasn't happened yet. And the reason is the city is still completing its community plan. Part of Terrace's problem is the lack of space zoned for R3 development, R3 meaning multi-family dwellings.
That's certainly what's causing the problem at City Hall, is the inventory of R3 land is very, very low. There's probably only 2 or 3 possible good sites that could be constructed on. So developers are turning to R2 properties and requesting an upgrading in the zoning or a rezoning.
And R2 is what?
And R2 is generally what you would either put a single-family dwelling in, or duplexes, could allow basement suites, that sort of thing. What it does not allow is a multifamily dwelling.
An attempt by Sheridan and a few others on council to have an area rezoned to R3 was defeated last summer, when area residents petitioned against it.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Thank you for staying with us. In 1966, a small group of dedicated volunteers created an organization to provide a unified voice for amateur sport in British Columbia. Sport BC is a non-profit sport federation representing over 70 provincial, disability, and multi-sport organizations. Let us return to the archives with Executive Director John Mills.
The provincial government generates a profit of about $200 million each year from its lottery sales. Traditionally, about $6.5 million of that has gone into the sports system through the provincial sport organizations. We're trying to build a case to increase that allocation to the provincial sport organizations from $6.5 to $10.5 million, and that $4 million increase represents approximately 2% of the current lottery profit. So we're asking the provincial government to top up what it's investing in the sports system right now with another 2% of the $200 million lottery profit.
Is that a realistic request?
Well, we think it is. We see it not so much as a cost, but as an investment in the sports system. And in fact, the politicians have said to us, well, fine, if we're to invest another $4 million, what would you do with the money? And we've made a commitment to try to improve the quality of leadership, coaches and officials and administrators, by increasing the number of clinics and opportunities that sport leaders in communities all over the province have to upgrade their skills. We think that the quality of a sport experience is really, the main factor is the quality of the leadership. So if we can improve the efforts of the coaches and officials throughout the province, we feel we'll have made a significant contribution to communities all over BC.
Most people would say they'd like to see more money going into, let's say, health care for the province. And most people would agree that it may be much more important than putting money into sports. Do you agree?
Certainly, if people are on the waiting list for heart operations, obviously if we need to spend dollars to cure those people, then that must be done. But investing in the sports system is a long-term investment in the health care of all British Columbians. If we can introduce young people to an active lifestyle that they can maintain all through their years, they'll be less likely, more resistant to heart disease, healthier people, and ultimately will reduce the demand for health care by investing a little bit of money early on in prevention of illness.
What percentage of population now is directly associated or indirectly associated with Sport BC?
Well, of the 3 million people that are citizens in British Columbia, 719,000 are members of provincial sport organizations. So approximately 25% of the province are directly connected to a provincial sport organization and are part of the sport family. By extension, there are probably another 700,000 people who are casual participants in tennis or golf or jogging, and they don't do it in an organized fashion. And you throw in the parents and grandparents of those children that are playing, the sports system touches just about everybody in the province.
Okay, a 2% increase in the funds. What can we see in the Northwest as far as a 2% increase? How does that affect the Northwest?
The message that I've heard in my tour in the last few days is that we'd like to have coaching clinics every year instead of every second year. Why do we all have to gather together in Terrace? What's the matter with having a clinic in Burns Lake or a clinic in Houston? That is the kind of outcome that we expect, that the provincial sport organizations with some more resources on hand will be able to do a better job of serving more communities throughout the province. So that's the payoff, if you like, for the North, is that more access to coaching clinics and officials clinics than they've been getting currently.
Were there any concerns aimed or brought up by the local rec directors in the Northwest?
Well, I think that there's a concern about the insensitivity of the Lower Mainland to the needs of those in the North.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome back to Open Connection. The best way to stay safe under extreme conditions is to avoid driving while the weather improves, according to the BC government website under Driving Tips. Let us return to the archives with John Mills of Sport BC.
And I didn't have to travel up here to know that, but it is good to spend time with people and understand specifically, what those concerns are. If someone sitting at a desk in Vancouver and Victoria sees no reason why people can't gather in Smithers from all of the communities around, if that person hasn't tried to do that in the middle of winter, wondering whether or not they'll get there, and once they get there, whether or not they'll be able to get back. So I think I've become more sensitive as a result of this tour to what those concerns are. In many instances, they come down to two issues. One is sufficient funding to send their coaches and athletes to training and to competition, and the other is to hang on to their volunteers, to try to encourage them to stay involved in sport and beat the average of about 4 years, which is the average tenure of a volunteer coach or official. I think all of the communities would like to be able to hang on to their volunteers for a little longer than that and benefit from their expertise.
Let's look at the political response. What has the response been from our political core up here in the Northwest as far as the MLAs?
Well, we've been very encouraged. I met yesterday with Ms. Jackie Piment from Bulkley Valley Stikine, and I met today with Mr. Giesbrecht, and they were familiar with the issue. I think they both have a good understanding of the sports system, obviously have a good understanding of the sports system in the North. I feel they were very supportive of their sport people in their communities and are concerned that if a decision is made at a provincial level, investing another $4 million in the sports system, that they get their share for their communities up here, which is exactly what I would expect them to do. We've been very encouraged by the response that we've received from the elected officials. It's a big decision, mind you, and we don't expect them to make it hastily. We want to present them with a clearly thought out business plan that will build a solid case for why it's a good investment.
Okay, a lot of people would say in these tough economic times, whether there's money there for an increase, a 2% increase, whatever it may be, some people would look at that and say, well, let's just streamline our whole effect and our whole existing funds as they stand now. Is that possible, or is there a need for the 2%?
Well, I would say that the sports system is probably the leanest, most efficient public system there is in the province. When you consider that there's a small core of about 100 people throughout the whole province that are paid to work in the sports system. The rest of the system is driven entirely by volunteers. The economic impact of those volunteers is absolutely staggering. I really don't think we can do any more with any less than we have now. If the sports system is to serve what is a growing demand, it really needs to receive additional funds. I should point out that 4 years ago, the aggregate grant to provincial sport organizations was $7.5 million. It's eroded to its current state of $6.5 million, and those are not adjusted dollars, those are actual real dollars. So the sports system has been getting by with less and less as inflation and so on erode the capacity of the $6.5 million. So I think we're at a point right now where the only alternative is to cut programs if the pie shrinks anymore.
What are you asking the ordinary taxpayer in the Northwest as far as helping you achieve this 2% increase?
Well, our board of directors is asking people all over the province to learn more about their sports system, how it works, how it's connected to the provincial sports system. And if they see the benefit of investing further dollars in the sports system, to contact their elected officials and let them know that they think it's an important thing, an important growth step for British Columbia to recommit itself to the development of a solid sports system.
Do you have a time limit set aside where you want to say by this time we would like to see this implemented by this time?
Well, we've approached it this way. the provincial government is the biggest single sponsor of the sports system with that $6.5 million. And we're asking them to almost double their investment. Any corporation that had to make a decision like that would not make it in 30 days or 60 days or 90 days. It's an 18-month to 24-month decision. While we don't want to cut an unnecessary amount of slack for the public officials to deal with this issue, we do see the need for some deliberation and some debate on this issue.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Created by Indigenous people of the Pacific Northwest, totem poles represent and commemorate ancestry, histories, people, or events. In this final segment of Open Connection, we return to the archives as Stan Bevan and Ken McNeil share what they have planned for Expo 92 in Spain.
Stan Bevan and Ken McNeil are cousins, and they've learned much of their craft from their uncle, Tlingit master artist Dempsey Bob. Their collaboration for Expo 92 in Spain began with plans for another project in Vancouver.
It started with the commission for the First Nations House of Learning, and we put in some drawings for that commission. And with the drawings that we put in, there was also a commission for this project out, and they just happened to see the drawings that were shown to them by Bill McLennan, and they picked it on the theme of a grizzly bear, and one of our drawings was a grizzly bear.
The layperson might have a hard time imagining this log turning into a work of art, but that's how it began 3 months ago at the Kitsillas Carving House. By the middle of November, the grizzly bear had appeared, coaxed by sharp metal tools from the wood. The pole is a product of the carver's skills and research, and of the vibrant culture they're recapturing.
Long ago, the art was, a lot of it was, the people spoke through the art, and it meant quite a bit, the history, the culture, and everything, and the art was very everywhere in the culture. And we're bringing back the strength of the art.
A museum design expert from the University of British Columbia is part of the team putting together BC's portion of the Canadian exhibit at Expo 92. Bill McClelland has ensured Bevan and McNeil's work a prominent position at the pavilion's exit.
Yeah, the idea of any pavilion at any expo, and that is to make an impact. I mean, there is such a competition, visual competition between even between the provinces within the Canadian pavilion. And so it was really left to Northwest Coast Art, which is such a highly recognized art form. And that's what the designers for the pavilion felt would make the best impact from British Columbia, would be a traditional totem carving.
The BC Pavilion will include several other pieces of North Coast native art as well, 2 of which will come from Kitimat.
Right now we're commissioning 3 other pieces. There's a large painted screen, which is Nuhulk, or Bellacoola, being done by Glenn and Marvin Tallio and Ben Housty. There's a transformation bear costume being done by Lyle Wilson, who is Heisla from Kitimat, and he's also doing a large Sonaquah mask. These are all part of a sort of an incredible visual presentation and animation sequence in that I think will knock people's socks off for sure.
The grizzly bear pole left Kitsillas November 26th for Vancouver. Now it's on its way by ship to Spain, with the World's Fair set for May. McClellan is confident it will make a good impression.
Yeah, I think they've done a really good job sculpturally. I mean, poles are a combination of sculpture and character in that, and subtle things of where the eyes are positioned and how the eyes look in that. And I think they've really caught all the characteristics. They've been studying very hard. And rebuilding an art form, and it is a bit of a rebuilding. For quite some time, major poles have not been carved, and so there's a lot of work to be done in revitalization of this art form, and they've done a great job. But they have a great teacher. Their uncle Dempsey Bob is, I think, perhaps the finest carver on the Northwest Coast.
Both Bevan and McNeil have received recognition from around North America for their work, but this is their first exposure to such a wide international audience.
Personally, well, I feel pretty good about that because Stan and I will be leaving our mark in this world, and people will know us, and it feels pretty good because, like, I never ever figured that I'll be in this sort of stature with the art. Like, I knew that eventually one of these days I will be getting this type of recognition, but it's coming sooner than I figured.
Along with the personal satisfaction recognition like this brings, neither Carver nor the museum expert has overlooked the business aspect of this exhibition either. They hope Expo 92 opens the door to new sales for Northwest Native art.
Well, certainly, it's basic economics of artists in that the pieces are commissioned, but quite often it's smaller pieces, small masks or jewelry and that. But the renowned pieces are the large, massive sculptings in that. And by producing these pieces and having them shown in Europe, hopefully we'll gain more commissions for the artists involved.
That idea is always with us all the time. Like, each piece we do, we make sure we put every effort into it to make it the best that we could, just so that we could get these other opportunities.
The cousins have worked on a number of projects together in the past. Their first, without their teacher Dempsey Bob, was last year. They each carved 2 poles for the Muxkamal Housing Society in Terrace. Those poles were raised with great ceremony at the grand opening of the housing complex. Bevan had carved 2 of them, while McNeil created the other pair. This latest project, the pole for Expo 92, is the first in which the carvers have actually worked on the same pole, and they'll likely do it again. Both agree this pole was a good experience.
Oh, well, Stan and I, we've been working together for quite a while, for the past 2.5 years, and this is the first time that we worked on a pole together. Like, we have this is our 7th pole that we finished, and out of the 7, this is the first one that we actually worked together on, and it was no problem at all because we both know what we want, and we're both starting to think the same, and like, we're working towards the Tsimshian style, and we've been studying that together, so we both know what we want, and it's like having another extra pair of hands.
Both pairs of hands are now busy on a new project, the drawings for which led to the Expo Commission.
It's a 17-foot house post. It's part of the First Nations House of Learning. It's a new complex for the Native programs at UBC, and that'll be put up with 4 different other house posts from different artists from BC, and also 2 beams that were chosen by another artist.
Northwest residents can appreciate the work of Bevan and McNeil in Terrace, Prince Rupert, and Ketchikan. Pieces they've created have also become part of many major exhibitions and museum, private, and corporate collections. Now their contribution to North Coast Native art will be on prominent display in Europe.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Open Connection. The greatest distance in the existence of man is not from here to there, but the connection from his mind and heart. If we can conquer that distance, we can soar like an eagle and realize our immensity within. I'm Robert Pictou.